welcome everybody. We have an interesting interview today. I'm speaking with Greg Cochran. He's a professor of applied theology at California Baptist. Somewhat he has been studying what's going on in Nigeria. He's been doing some writing about it. So he doesn't claim to be an expert, but this is a guy who's really been looking into it with fresh eyes. And so it's just interesting to talk to somebody like this in his position, but who's data driven and looking to get to the truth. I think we're going to have an interesting discussion. Greg, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jeff. It's my pleasure. It's a real honor to get to speak to this issue. So important.
Right. Well, great. Greg, it's been, I suppose, a learning experience for you. Just kind of unpack this. When did you start looking at Nigeria and what are you seeing? It's a very complicated subject.
It is incredibly complicated. I was thinking I could do this full time and there would be no shortage of work. There's just so much out there to unpack. But I've been interested in the persecuted church for a few decades now.
Okay.
And I've known about Nigeria. Obviously, it's on the top 10 list every year. And, you hear Boko Haram and these sorts of things. But I guess more recently, I've been digging into some data about how Nigeria is so strategic, so important, and so volatile at the same time. Yeah. It's fascinating, inner workings and just trying to figure out the Christian way forward in that great nation. So, yeah, it's been driving me for a few months now. Yeah.
That's great. And the long history of persecution helps a lot. Yeah. And, I oftentimes, when people say, what's the worst country or what has your attention? I always point to Nigeria. So North Korea, look, you can argue every year it's the worst. But in terms of the numbers in the last 20 years, Nigeria is a shocker. And as we were discussing, before the cameras turned on, no one really knows the number. I use the number, up to 100,000. And then 3.5 million plus Christian farms stolen, massive land grab. And let's just start. The reason we're talking is because recently you wrote an article and we published one of your articles and you were responding to one of these arguments that it's one that drives me crazy and say, well, this is really at the heart. Look, it's all about climate change. And you're like, oh my gosh. But anyways, talk about that, unpack that a little bit. Is this thing about climate change?
Yeah, so I think the crux of my article was to say that that explanation is crashing like waves against the rocks. Truth has a way of wearing down the waves, and that narrative wave is coming, I think, to an end. Yeah. And that process probably started, back in, well, it's been ongoing, but in 2015, when President Buhari came in, an ethnic Fulani, and people noticed the Fulani herdsmen, and there didn't really seem to be any recompense for these violent attacks. So people were more suspicious. 2018 in Benue State, it was so patently obvious that A, the herders had no cows, and B, the people who were killed weren't farmers. They were Christians.
The people who are attacking are herders, but they have no cows.
But they have no cows, exactly. Yes. And the people being killed weren't farmers. So it's a bit ludicrous to say this was a farmer-herder conflict. And so then you have, even just this past year, in April 2023, 5-year-old boy beheaded. What does this have to do with the climate? And I think the climate is an easy sort of in a way makes us completely responsible and then really not even responsible at all. Because what are you going to do about the weather? It's big. There are economic issues. There are land issues. There is desertification. So it's plausible. And I think it gives, in a sense, people a plausible deniability. But the evidence on the ground, the violence that you're seeing when churches are attacked, when children are kidnapped, women are raped, that you have to throw out. And in fact, even if climate change were the root cause, it wouldn't matter. Those are inexcusable behaviors, and they have to be called what they are. Inexcusable behaviors that need to be recompensed. Justice demands it, right? Yeah, so I'm sorry I'm getting heated here, but
You get
it
on the
hurts. I
soapbox,
mean, it's
brother. Go
just
ahead, man.
it's
Let it
so
rip.
yeah. So to ask what I'm discovering that there's a lot to be concerned about when we look at
Yeah.
Nigeria.
And for those who, if their driving force in life is climate change, you can try to use this and spin it, but anybody who's doing it, it's really it's a misallocation because, as you said, it could be a contributing factor. I think the bigger contributing factor is the economics of that the Fulanis were nomadic herders, and those days are closing out, and they know these
Right.
guys are the smartest guys in the room. They always have been. And so they've got a strategic plan. They look ahead 100 years and they're like, we're in trouble. And
Yeah.
so then you understand why they're taking out the middle belt, the agrarian middle belt, why they're driving out the farmers. But then too, why are they killing children? How many schools, what did you say? How many schools, how many churches have been
Yeah,
attacked?
in one of the articles that I read, I think it was about 16,000 churches and 2,000 schools. So Christian schools.
Doesn't sound like a herder farmer conflict.
Yeah, right. Right.
Yeah, and to that point, you see it. You see the economic side of it. Now, the Fulanis, of course, are Muslim, and they are a tribe that is beyond Nigeria. They bridge several
Right.
countries, and they're bringing in foreign fighters. So most of these people, like you said, the attackers, there's no cows. They are armed. They speak foreign languages, and they're hired guns. But they are Fulani typically. And so you could see it's a great hollowing out. It's an attack on infrastructure. It's an attack on religion. But it's also so it's complicated. But at its very core, there is a slow moving jihad here, and perhaps even a genocide in the micro sense. It's not for any particular tribe. It's anybody who is in that middle belt, and that's Christian.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And it could even be, it could even be non-Christians. It could, still be some tribes.
yeah,
It could even be some other Muslims that aren't sympathetic to this particular cause. But again, that's more from a totalitarian impulse than it is from excusing and saying this isn't targeting Christians, because
yeah,
clearly when you attack a church
clearly,
service,
yeah,
you're attacking Christians. You know what you're doing.
yes.
In fact, that's the thing that I think Christians should be really united on. Not just Christians, but people who care about this. And the same would be true with a mosque too. But if someone comes in and attacks people while they're gathered for worship, this isn't war. This isn't, no one's hiding weapons in these places. It's an intentional attack against innocents.
Yeah.
Okay, so that has to be called out.
Yes.
It doesn't matter if climate change is the reason. It doesn't matter at that point. What
Yeah.
you're saying ostensibly is your reason. When you do that, every peace-loving person, every person who's on the side of truth or justice needs to speak with one united voice and say, unacceptable in Nigeria. This is unacceptable from a UN human rights declaration standpoint. It's unacceptable from the constitutional standpoint. It's just unacceptable from common sense and common law standpoint.
Yeah.
And we're not negotiating anything until this is dealt with.
Yeah.
And I think clear statements like that would help.
Yeah, and especially if it came from the top. Oh my gosh, that would make all the difference. So if the president, was to say something, and depending on the administration, some things have been said, and that causes a stir. So it's the power of the presidency, which is the bully pulpit, and
Right.
the Nigerians, if anything, are extremely business minded. And so if they started getting a black eye, which they absolutely should, the Nigerian government should, and to be, for them to be unveiled as to who these guys are and what they're actually about. Because in the end, you can't kill this many people. You can't let it go on and on and on without it being clear that the fix is in. This is my opinion, that the fix is in. And look, you talk to the Nigerians, and they'll all tell you, it's like, look, since the Brits, it's like Muslims have controlled, they've been the deep state, and they have controlled intel, the army, and the police. So it doesn't matter. So we had a Christian president. He couldn't get anything done. He was stymied. He doesn't really have control. there was a move for many states to create militias, and that was vigorously
Right.
put down. So now
Right.
that's starting to change. They're not militias, but anyways, that's starting to change, and that is the only
Yeah.
hope to fight against the federal government. You talk about Jonathan Goodluck, and what did you discover, and what have you read about that? Some describe this as a jihad that has deep, deep, long roots.
Yeah. So, well, it was the recent Religious Freedom Institute summit where Father Ambrose was speaking about he's Nigerian. He was speaking. He's a Roman Catholic priest, and he was speaking about his own experience. And he really, started just hammering this point that this is not climate change. In fact, he didn't call it jihadist terror. He called it, going back to the late 1700s, back to 1804, when there was a caliphate in West Africa that included parts of northwest Nigeria. He said this is a continuation of that jihad. And so I started that, I was like, okay, what is the history? And started digging around and found that actually in 2012, President Jonathan Goodluck actually made that declaration. He had gotten to a point where this was enough. He said, I can't keep asking people to be patient while we work this out.
Yeah.
People are going to defend their property. They're going to defend their lives. And what we're dealing with is a jihad that started in 1804. So he clearly tied it historically to the Fulani Caliphate from 1804.
That's a man whose opinion is probably worth listening to, at least to be intrigued by it and look into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a fascinating conversation, and of course we're not going to get to the bottom of it today, but I just thought it'd be great to have you on. If anything, we have to be clear, as you said, about what's going on, to name what is going on. It's mass murder. It's, if you want to use genocide with a small g, in the micro, in that area, mass killing of Christians, and to not let the Nigerian government get away with this anymore, where they call it different things. They keep talking about how hard it is to find these guys, and it's a tit for tat. There's no tit for tat war. So we will revisit again, but it has been
equivocating
wonderful.
It has been wonderful thing.
Sorry, I'm stepping on you.
No, you're good. You're fine. The equivocating is mind blowing. And Acts 16, this is kind of one of those moments where Paul calls the Philippian these rulers to account and says, okay, your law says you don't beat a Roman, you just beat a Roman. I'm not walking away quietly. You come face to face, and you can let me go. And it might be one of those moments where it's time to speak up.
That is a great word. That's a good word to end on. We will have you back. Keep digging, keep learning, and it's just fun to look through your eyes and to see what you're discovering and researching. And so glad you're in the fight.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it so much. Have a great day.
God bless.